3 days, how many days? 4 days after my second knee surgery.
You look like $1,000,000.
Oh, yeah.
How old are you, Bubby? 75?
75.
You're
Oh,
amazing.
goodness. Don't tell anybody.
I'm going to zoom in on you.
Your arm's going to get tired doing it. Don't zoom me in too fast, too much.
It doesn't. It's not that close. Okay. So, let's see. We're going to talk about like you growing up and all that kind of stuff. So, what's your earliest memory of when you were a little kid?
My earliest memory is living in a little house. I was probably, I'm going to say 3 or 4, remembering having like a small house with a little coal stove in a kitchen, actually, and we didn't have a bathroom up in the main kitchen. We had to shower down in the basement, but that was common for people in those days in 1935. So I remember parts of the house and the going down to the basement, and often taking a tub bath in a little portable tub as little girl, and the coal. I remember that furnace in the house and the bedrooms where I think there were 3 of us, maybe in one bed. My 2 brothers were with my mother and dad, and there was I guess at that time, my older, when I remember, my 2 older sisters were out of the house. I think they were already in Washington, D.C. working, and then there was my sister Dorothy that lived at home. So I guess maybe there was just the 2 of us in the bed, but occasionally a third one would be there.
So yeah, there were 5 kids.
There's 6.
6.
4 of us girls. There was Elsie was the oldest, Betty, Dottie, me, my brother Hezzy, or Harold, and my brother Dave.
I forgot about Hezzy.
Yeah. So, and I remember things. I remember my dad and my mom very well at that time, and I remember my brother being born, who was about 2 years younger than I was. So I was only 2 or 2.5 years old. That I remember the doctor coming to the house and going upstairs and seeing. And having a baby there.
It's like Kelsey and Elizabeth and Allison.
Right. So anyway, and my dad, I sort of remember my dad coming home, and don't remember, my mother being in bed for long or anything like that. And really, I remember going to grade school. I had a lot of childhood illnesses.
Oh, like what?
Like whooping cough, measles, chicken pox, and all that when I was in. We didn't have kindergarten then, but when I was in first grade, I had a lot of those. We all did. It went from my brothers to me, because my 3 older sisters were, quite a bit older than I. I think there's 7 years between my sister Dottie, and I.
So what's the age difference between all of you?
Well, like Elsie and Betty are like about 18 months apart or something like that. And then there's about 3 years or 4 till after Dottie was 2 years, about 4 years younger, I think, than Betty. And then there's like 7 years that I'm younger than Dottie, and then 2. The Hezzy, I was about 2 or 2.5, and then Dave a couple years in too. It's just different. We were sort of, in a way, like 2 different families.
Yeah.
But all the same parents. Of course, that were Depression years. That I guess 1935 was pretty much the middle of the Depression. My sisters remember a lot more of the tough times that my parents had to go through, and that. And by the time I was growing up, things were getting a lot better.
So did you have lots of playmates and friends, or did you hang out more with your sisters and your brothers?
No, I just don't remember a lot of, I remember roller skating, and I relate everything to when we lived in Moxham until I went to first grade, and when I had to repeat because of being so sick, missing so much school. So I had to spend 2 first grades in Moxham. And then I think in the middle of my 2nd grade, I don't know if it was the middle of the year or after that, we moved to Ferndale. So a lot of things like I can remember from Moxham, and I relate to my age, so I was probably about 6 years old roller skating, and I was probably with a friend, and there's one that I particularly remember that lived close by. She was younger than I was, and we were roller skating. I was coming down this little hill. It seemed like a big hill at the time, but every once in a while I go up and check it out. If I'm in Moxham, I'll drop, oh, that's where I hurt my knee. I had to get stitches, you know, and left a scar for a long time. Yeah,
now look at your scars.
Still have a lot more, my knees are pretty scarred. So anyway, I remember, those are the things I pretty much remember in Moxham. My dad worked in the mill, and I'd remember, you know, all the mill guys. My mother, I guess we walked down there or something, because I remember seeing them all coming out of the steel mill there. The guys all dark and dirty and working, and mostly they'd get, you know, they'd come out probably on payday or something. So I just remember sort of that. And really, up to that point, I remember playing on, like, along the corner of a street, sitting on a curb, remembering some of that stuff. And then after we moved to Ferndale, then I was in 2nd grade, and very shy. I thought I was very shy and dorky. There's pictures to prove it.
I remember you had glasses.
Yeah, and pigtails. I had pigtails, and but anyway, I did pretty good in school, except for, I think, my shyness, and that lasted most through grade school. I'd be, you know, hate to get up in front of people and that, and then around 6th grade, I started feeling, you know, sort of different, and just sort of came out of some of that shyness. And not totally, but then moving on. That was 6th grade was my last year in the elementary school building. And then the next year we went to 7th grade, and it was junior high, but it was in the senior high school class. And we had some great teachers at that time, and really, you know, just I have to attribute coming out of my shyness to some of the things that the teachers did with public speaking, and taking the fear out of, you know, getting up in front of a class. And I just seemed to grow out of that shyness right around then, and got involved in school activities from 9th grade, cheerleading, and my friends and I would play girls basketball. We'd have summer volleyball teams, and we were tomboys in a way. You know? And,
what were your parents' attitude about, like, education in school and stuff? Did they really stress it, or it was just what you did?
I never really had to be pushed. I don't think I did well. Wasn't always, but I was a good average student, and I just loved, like I said, I started enjoying English and getting up in front of a class, and the classics and stuff like that. And then and later on, then I got into actually taking. I never knew what I wanted to do, and most people didn't go to college then, girls especially. A couple of my friends did, but I was taking a commercial course, because I don't know if you still have to do that, but we had to decide whether we wanted a college course or a commercial course. And I sort of did the middle of the line, you know, knowing that I probably wouldn't go to college, but I did, and would be some sort of work in an office of some sort. But I took algebra, I took geometry, and, you know, our basic history, civic, and stuff like that. Typing, I took typing. And, you know, I had pretty good grades. I don't remember, I probably had A's and B's and more probably C's, you know.
But so it wasn't like really stress at home. You just kind of did it. And you did your best.
Right. You know, my parents, neither of them had a high school education.
Now, did they move here?
Yeah, they were both born in Europe.
In Austria?
Well, my mother, it's a little confusing because of the way things have changed. But my mother, they used to say they both were born in Austria, but they didn't know each other then, and they met here. So my mother then, I think she was actually Czechoslovakian.
Oh.
And my father was Ukrainian, which was in the Ukraine, but I think it was Polish too.
Oh,
It's all those borders that were changing, around that changed after the war. I guess the First War and the Second World War.
So what year did they move over here?
Well, I guess my mother was very young, a small child, and so she was probably just a couple years old or so. And my father came up when he was 14 or 15 with a half brother.
Just him and his brother,
Yeah,
not the mom and dad. Wow.
His mother had died, and he had a stepmother, and that was sort of maybe a stepbrother too. But they seemed to, I guess, okay. They got together, and when they got into the United States, and my father came to Pennsylvania, and my uncle, which was step-uncle, he went up to Canada. So we really didn't have any relationship with him, other than my dad would talk about it a little bit.
Did your mom have any family here?
She, after she was born, she had two younger sisters. So they were born in the United States, as far as I know, the two younger sisters. So,
did you see them?
Yeah, when we were growing up, Aunt Mary, I had an Aunt Mary, and she had two girls. They had two girls, and then my other aunt, I don't remember. We didn't see her much. She's sort of I don't know. It wasn't a great family thing there.
They weren't real close?
No, but my sister Betty has some stories that she tells that they didn't work. That my mother's parents didn't treat them real nice. But my mother, when they got sick, my mom took care of them, and they both lived to be in their 80s. And
do you remember your grandparents?
Very
your
little,
side?
And I think when I was about 13 is when I think my grandmother died first, and I'm not sure, it might have been cancer.
Oh.
And then my grandfather lived alone, and then I remember, my mother going over there to take care of him, and that. I was probably about 13 then or so.
And did they live close by?
They lived in the area called Woodvale, and what do you call that? Conemaugh Borough.
Okay.
Woodvale is where they mostly lived, and I think after my grandmother passed away, then he moved to another area.
Did like the house you grew up in, was it in a neighborhood? Did you have like neighbors close by and other kids in the neighborhood?
It was in Moxon, and like I said, it was a 4-bedroom house, a little house, and a kitchen, big kitchen, not a big, but nice sized kitchen, and a living room. I think, somehow in my mind there seems that there was a dining area, but I don't remember that too well. And 2 bedrooms upstairs, but not a bath.
Oh, okay.
So.
Did you guys have to do chores around the house?
Not really, not too much. When I got older, my mother just took care of everything. She sometimes.
So that's where you get it.
Yeah, sometimes I would ask her to, show me how to do things. I never scrubbed the floor or anything like that. I don't even remember helping out with dishes.
Isn't that funny?
It is.
I always thought generations before us, they did a lot more of that, but I don't know. It's kind of the other way around.
Yeah, maybe I think my older sisters have stories. That Betty tells me that my Elsie and Betty were both born in Pittsburgh. My dad had been gone there to work in the steel mill after they got married, and my mother was I think she was only 17 or 18.
Oh, wow.
You know. She's pretty young. And there was, I think, 11 years between them.
Wow.
So they moved to Pittsburgh, and they lost everything, I guess, during the Depression, and that's what took them to Pittsburgh. And so they lived there, and then they moved back to Johnstown, and my sister Dottie was born. And in the middle, I guess, times were bad, but I don't think the Depression had totally hit yet, since she's like 7, it's the late 20s. And, you know. So my mother actually left and went to New York to do housework.
Oh, wow.
And left 3 little kids in
with your
care
dad?
of my dad.
Whoa.
And so I never really, I mean, my sister has told me that, but I would, of course, wouldn't have any memory of that.
Right.
And she said that they would have to do things. She said just taking care. She said like Elsie and Betty would have to take care of Dottie. And they lived in an apartment, and there was an Italian lady, she said, that lived down below and would bring them food and stuff like that. And there were food lines and after that. So it was a tough time, you know. And so she said she said Mom didn't stay there too long doing that housework. And of course, that's what she was doing before she was married. She was taking care of a house up in Westmont. That's what people did, you know.
Did she work when after she married your dad?
No, I don't think she did any housework.
Except
other
for
than that trip to
yeah.
go, and then they realized that was not going to
Oh,
work.
yeah.
And
Why that'd be hard.
So got back into things, and then I guess about then the Depression started getting better. So when I grew up, I was sort of spoiled, I guess, because you know, things were so much different than they were for my sisters.
Yeah, no kidding. Did you guys do like family fun activities together? I mean, were you able to do that kind of stuff during that time?
There were parks around, you know, in Johnstown, and we would go visit family, and we didn't. I remember one time. I was probably a teenager by then. You know, we took a trip to Chicago. My dad drove, and it was my 2 brothers and I that I can remember, and and my mother and dad. And we went to visit some relative of my mother's. And I remember the trip a little bit, but not a whole lot. But that was something.
Yeah, to go all the way to Chicago.
Go to Chicago.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so I guess we stayed. I remember staying with them, and something about a glider, you know, those porch gliders they had on their porch. You know, we had one of those too. So when we moved to Ferndale, then it was like, boy, a big, you know, nice step. You know, my dad was working steady in the mill, and of course my money was better, and but then there were always strikes and tough times.
Sure.
But really, it was a good, you know, I just never really caused a lot of problems with it as I was growing up. I
You never got in any trouble?
Restrictions, a little bit, but, you know, nothing that I can, you know, there weren't a lot of fights or anything like that. Some of my brothers, you know, they did, I guess, but...
The brothers fought with each other, not with the sisters. But all your sisters
I was the only girl. Sometimes by then I was, that's that's a whole big story.
What's that?
My sisters came home from the war, and they were not from the war, but from Washington, D.C. Their husbands were in the war. And Elsie had met her husband, who was in the Navy. And Elsie never really dated a lot, or they didn't date, you know. Elsie didn't say. So she met her husband, Dick, Richard Crandall, and they got married. But I think he came home once with her, and then they ended up getting married. And then she moved out of town, and Betty met her. She was actually married. I think she might have been married to Speed and I'd have to clear that up with her, whether she did secretly and then got remarried.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure how that all worked out, even though we talk a lot, Betty and I, about times like that. But for some reason, it's not clear in my mind now. But so she...
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, so she marries her Bob, who came back then after the war. And when they'd come home and Dad remembers this in his family with his uncles, they'd come home from D.C. with presents and, wine and booze that
big
could
city
buy
stuff.
down there. And when they'd come home, it was always a big celebration, because they'd bring stuff. And I know as a child, they'd bring these big toys, bring us Easter baskets. We have a picture of us with my dad, all with these real nice Easter baskets. And my brother Dave has those pictures, and I wanted to get them.
Okay.
And we'd go up, we'd go somewhere maybe, and we were up in some field that we had pictures taken. And so anyway, it was, there's a lot to talk about with that part of growing up. But as far as me, I just got involved with things in high school then, the cheerleading, and it just seemed like I was wanted to be involved with everything. I joined anything I could.
Yeah. So you went from being really shy to really social.
Yeah, it was
That's
just
interesting.
it was really, and so cheerleading was really important to me, and I loved it. We all are my friends and that. So.
When you got into trouble, what kind of stuff would you do to get in trouble?
Oh, probably just staying out a little late or something. My best girlfriend just lived 3 doors, like Creedine, my best girlfriend.
I remember you talking about her.
And, there were a bunch of kids in that whole block, and we probably just hanging out in the corner, really, is about all we would do, and...
So if you got in trouble, who was the disciplinarian, your mom or your dad?
Well, I think pretty much maybe my dad. I think my dad maybe. That they just, like I said, it didn't seem strict to me at all, and yet I guess I didn't do anything that was. Dated a little bit, I didn't have a boyfriend or anything till when I was like a freshman or something, started being a little bit interested in boys or.
What about if you were upset about something or emotional stuff? Was that more your mom or your dad that you would go to if you had a problem like that?
Probably my mom, It was just like, it just seemed like we settled it ourselves among our friends, and, just probably go to my room and just pout it out.
You don't feel like you had to go to them with stuff very often?
Go to what?
You didn't have to go to your parents with stuff very often. You figured it out more.
You just sort of knew things. When I was 16, I wanted to get a job. So I got a job, what everybody usually did. The stores were open Thursday nights, and so after school, get on a streetcar or a bus and go get a few hours. We go from, I think we got out about 3 or so, and then we'd go take the bus into Johnstown, and I worked at Glosser Brothers for probably 5 or 6 hours on Thursday, and then we'd work all day Saturday. If we were lucky, And at the end of the week, they would give us a little brown envelope with cash in it.
Oh, you're kidding!
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was usually $1.75 or something like that.
So what'd you do with your money?
Well, most of it I kept, and
same.
used it. It was something that I didn't have to ask my parents for. Then, one part of me that I always wanted to be independent in that way, have my spending money. So from that point on, it took care of things that I wanted for school, and didn't really buy clothes with it, because that really, at that point, my mother bought me stuff. We'd go shopping into Johnstown there. But really back then, if we had, and I've said this before, if we had clothes, a different outfit to wear every week, and this was not everybody was like that. You had a different outfit for every day of the week for school.
For 1 week.
For 1 week. That was your wardrobe.
That
then,
should be plenty.
Yes, it should be. And then you added a couple sweaters you could match up with a different skirt, and you'd or mix and match things. You know, we wore the Bobby socks and saddle shoes, and then I remember my mother giving me money to buy, and I was probably 17 or so then. My girlfriend and I both got money, and we were able to go shopping for ourselves. We each bought a dress, you know, and they were pink. They were both pink, but different styles. So that was the first I remember of ever shopping for myself. And
how much did a dress cost?
Oh, I don't remember, but they were more expensive than what, you know. You didn't have really. You could get cheap clothes. It was probably maybe $10 or $8 or $10 or something. But for that time, you know. So then...
well, if you're only making 75 cents a week, it takes a while to save up for an $10 dress.
Yeah. So when I was in, that was my first, when I first started working. And then I think I was probably a sophomore then because of my repeating first grade. You know,
oh, no, I didn't realize you repeated first grade.
Yeah, I repeated first grade.
Because you were so shy? Or?
No, but the illnesses.
Oh, the illnesses. Oh, right. Okay.
I was had one right after another. And so anyway, I was a year older, so I think probably was about, when I got the job, you could work at 16. Well, then the next summer, I got a job at a bakery down in Ferndale. And you just do little office work, and not really, it was office work, filing and taking the sales people, the delivery people would return their bill, all their stuff. I remember that. And then I worked there, I think, between my, probably my junior and senior year in a summer. And then after school, they offered me, when I graduated, they offered me a job there. But then my teacher in bookkeeping, we called it then, she knew somebody, and she recommended me to go to this job to work at Commercial Credit, which was a big financial office. You know? And it was a nice job, you know. And I started out with just, I forget what I actually did when I first went in there, probably just filing and things like that.
So were you still in high school then, or was this after
No, that
graduate?
was my first year out of high school.
Okay.
And I sort of had to make that, do I want to stay at this bakery, or do I want to get this job? In Johnstown, I had to take a bus or a streetcar every day into town.
And you still lived at home with your parents?
Yeah, still lived at home. And so I did that, and that went on, and I don't think I got cash for that. I think we got a check, but it was not, I mean, I'm going to say it was like maybe $65 a week or something, if even that.
Wow.
It seems like $62, $63 is what we would get at the end for a week. And so then, as I was working there, I liked it because they would do a lot of financing with, it wasn't a bank, it was a finance company. So they would finance cars for dealerships and leases, bank leasing and that. And so they moved me up into a position where I remember sitting in this corner office with a desk, and I would investigate everybody's credit.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
interesting.
For these, and I'd fill in the forms and all that, and then they'd have to go to to a district type, whoever was handling that, and they'd take all the information. You'd get the high credit, what they owed, and the salaries, and I'd fill all that form in with a lease, and they'd sign it, and I'd send it to the guy at another desk, and they'd approve it, and the car dealerships would get their check.
Oh, wow. It's okay. It's so hard to imagine, like, doing all that without computers.
I know. And then,
Running
I was doing that, and then they added the insurance onto my job, where I'd have to figure, they would put like I guess it was like some sort of an insurance policy that they would want you to have while you had the lease.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Yeah, but
sense.
it was very small. It was not big, but you'd have to calculate the insurance in that, and that was. So I did real well at the job there, and I liked that, and continued that until right after I was married, and I worked the first till Barb was born in June, and I think I worked till about May, and it was a bad winter driving down to Johnstown and from Wimber, so that's
you ready to be
next
done
part
after
of my life.
that? Yeah.
You have any more questions?
Oh yeah, I have more about when you
that.
were.
Okay. Go ahead.
When you were growing up and you had to ask permission to go somewhere, who would you ask? Would you ask your mom or your dad?
Usually my mom, because she was home more. Back then, my dad was working different shifts.
Did he work like 40 hours a week, or did he work more than
about
that?
40 hours, but he worked daylight. Most of the time he either worked daylight, I think there were 3 shifts, daylight, night shift, evening shift, and then there was a night shift at work.
And did that change a lot?
No, mostly that's how he worked, either morning shift or the afternoon shift.
Okay.
So there would be 3. At first was like probably 7 to 3, and then the next shift was 3 to 11. They would always say he's working 3 to 11 this week,
And then would it change like weekly or monthly? Or?
Yeah, maybe like it could change. I don't know. I think they were on a shift for probably a while. I don't really remember that, but so like I said, my mom was.
She was the one usually home.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever have any family squabbles, like between you and your brothers and sisters, or between like I guess probably not so much between your mom and dad's families because they weren't around.
Yeah, we did. There were some issues with my family. We never got involved in it really much. They sort of kept it. If there were, I think, my mother had her family there, and not my father didn't have any family.
Right.
So there were some issues with her family, but not that we ever got involved with. I'm sure and with my sisters, it was tough times for them because Elsie, they got married without having anything, and then they didn't have a place to live, and they had to come back home and live at home
with their husbands.
With their husbands.
Oh, wow.
And we really, at that time, we had a 3-bedroom house when I was growing up. That's when I was in high school, like 13 or so, I guess, or even before high school. They started, coming home, and I'd say, well, how can, my mother and dad would feed them. They couldn't, and it was a problem trying to get my brother-in-law's jobs in the mill. And now Betty and Speed, he did pretty good. And they ended up with good jobs in the mill. But that was hard at that time. I guess it was probably just as hard for them because they started having, Elsie had a little girl, Bunny, living at home. And then there were times when when they finally got out, then Betty came home once, I think, because there were issues with Speed's family, with her husband's family. She didn't like having to live there. They didn't have houses.
Where did they live?
They lived up in Ferndale, but in another, about 5 blocks away.
But they lived with his family?
Yeah, for a while.
Wow, that had to have been hard for everybody.
Yeah, so...
Did people side with each other in the family? Like, who fought with who? And
yeah, you know what? I'm sure there were, I guess there were issues, but nobody really held grudges or anything. It was always, not a big problem. I'm sure one would probably get mad at the other, and
it was more the 3 of them though, fighting among themselves.
Even
not so much.
Dottie wasn't sort of like that. It was mostly Elsie and Betty. But Dottie was a teenager then, and she met her future husband, and so she she just went crazy, fell in love with him, and then she got married right out of high school. Then I guess, and she had. I think she actually lost a baby before they were married.
Really? Wow.
I think she was pregnant and she lost a baby and a little girl. And you know what? I think that's true. I have to ask Betty about that one.
Wow.
So then she had, she got married, and Joe worked, you know, it was like one person would get another person a job in the mill. And actually Dottie and Joe, when they got married, they lived with Elsie and Dick.
Wow. Was that pretty common back then,
yes.
I would imagine, because of the way the economy
was? I guess it was, you know. I mean, I don't know. It just seems so...
so strange
so
now.
Strange but it really was, you know, and you're probably finding a lot of that nowadays, too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's what I was thinking. How funny it is, because that's happening a lot now. People are moving back home.
Right, and Betty and Speed, because he got a pretty good job at Bethlehem. And Betty started working then in Penn Traffic, and she had Bobby. He was little, but...
it seemed like she always worked. Betty always worked.
She started working early, and then she had Jab, and then I guess my mother and Dad would help out there too with
the kids.
With the kids, unless they were both in school then, you know, and I guess her husband Bob had some family around too, so I guess everybody helped out a little. And maybe Betty didn't work till they got older, you know, because I think Jabby even had some health problems, like some sort of a kidney problem.
Really?
And then, but then she, you know, she went to work when they were probably teenagers, and that's whenever she hurt her back, and she had a lot of back problems.
I remember that
at work
too.
And that,
but it was probably pretty uncommon, I would assume, for women to work back then, or not
in that
so much.
job. That was working in the department store and retail.
I mean, did most moms probably stay at home, or
a
did
lot
they
of
work?
most moms did, you know.
Yeah.
But they were that's when it was starting to, because they came back from the war and they were working in D.C. in offices, so that was getting common then. You know? And if you wanted to get ahead, that's what my sister Betty was always one. She wanted to get. Elsie and Dottie were more content with, you know, with whatever with just raising their family and that, you know. And I don't think they ever worked. Dottie did after a while then, but then.
Did you have like basic household rules in your family when you were growing up? Like you said, things.
Sort of
like what kind of stuff?
You know, sort of. You know, my mother they'd like have to go into Johnstown to buy their groceries, like weekly groceries. You know, the meat markets were local, but there was like a big GB department store, and they'd leave on a Saturday morning, like you know, and they'd give us these little chores to do. I just remember us all fighting about the chores. So.
Like you guys didn't want to do them, or you were trying to get someone else to do them?
Yeah, just among, you're supposed to do that. No, you're supposed to do it, you know. And what they were, I really don't remember, you know, because
that was chore day Saturday.
They were little chores.
Probably just to keep you out of trouble.
I'd probably make the beds and that, you know.
Did you have a curfew or those kind of rules?
No, not so much. A little bit of a curfew, you know, but not. It just seemed like it wasn't a strict curfew because we all hung around in neighborhoods.
Right, so there's really nowhere to go.
When I was young, and then as I got older, you know, my mother was pretty lenient with, you know, me going to dances and stuff. We used to go to, all of us girls would go out to, you know, dance on a Saturday night.
Well, plus nobody probably drove either.
Creedine had a car.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she always had her dad's car.
Right.
And that was the only one. And, so we'd all pile in there, you know. And
so what year was that when you were in high school? Was that?
Well, I graduated in 1954.
Okay, so the early
50s, yeah. And we had
your poodle skirts,
yeah,
and Bobby
and the fun thing was that, like, I would walk home from school every day for lunch.
Oh,
My mom would have lunch ready for us, and we probably had 40 minutes to an hour, maybe.
Did they have school lunches? You didn't want to do that,
No,
or
I think
that's what
mostly
everybody
brought
did?
your lunch,
Or you went
had
home.
school. Because some kids were bused from like Brownstown and Middle Taylor, but they mostly brought their lunch, if I can remember. Had a lunchroom and that. So I was probably about 4 blocks away from school, 4 or 5 blocks from high school, from grade school and high school. And we'd go home for lunch, and then we'd go back. And they always would have an activity when you'd go back. You could either be out and hanging out or whatever, but I know when we were in high school, and this is why I want to tell you this, they brought the Arthur Murray dancers.
Oh, no way!
We had dance lessons over our lunch hour.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I can still remember that. Oh my gosh, teaching us that. How was that first step that you learned?
Depends which dance.
Yeah, right. They were basic.
What did you remember?
Jitterbug. Mostly, I think we started with jitterbugging and stuff like that.
Which are called swing now.
Yeah, that was popular then.
Swing or jive or Lindy Hop is kind of
so
more like.
They did that, and sometimes they'd have the gym open. You could play ball. They'd have basketball, little things going on. I guess in the winter time mostly. And so I had a lot of friends in school. I was friends with everybody. Kids in the band. Of course, the cheerleaders marched with the band.
Oh, right.
We always fronted we always cheered in front of the band whenever we'd be in a parade or something. And it was. I enjoyed a lot of social life. I really did a lot.
Do you remember your first boyfriend?
Yeah, I do. It was a football player. He was from a town called Middle Taylor. And I sort of remember, in grade school having a crush on somebody.
You don't remember who it was?
No. But it was just a little something that I remember. And then meeting this fellow from, he came in on a bus from Middle Taylor. So how we actually met, I don't know, except we graduated together. So I guess it was through school. And I think after a game, we would cheer the junior high games and stuff. It wasn't all separate. We did everything then.
All the different sports.
So I think it was like either a probably junior varsity game. I think that's when I probably asked me to go home or something, and
like walk you home.
Yeah, because I think we had to. If we'd go somewhere, we'd have to go back to the school then on a bus, and then I think he walked me home, and then.
I remember that being a big thing. That was like a first date, even when we were growing up. Like for someone to walk you home from school was a big deal.
That was it.
That's so funny.
Then he, of course, if he missed a bus, he didn't have a way home. Because that was way on the other side of Johnstown. So, we just sort of dated. Nothing. I could say we liked each other a lot, but weren't serious at all.
Never thought you'd marry him or anything when you graduated.
But it was sort of, thing that you did. So that went on for just a short time. And then I think through the year, maybe later on, again we dated later on. And as we got older, went out with a couple of dates with him or something. And then there's another kid that I named Mike Bezick. Dad will love to hear this stuff. But so he asked me to the prom then when I was like a junior, I think, and went to the prom with him. And we dated through junior and senior high school, but never serious. But he got to be more serious about after we graduated. He went to some technical school, I think, and I was still dating him a little bit, but telling him, pretty much that wasn't going to work out.
You weren't interested.
No, but he didn't. He just seemed to didn't understand it. But then when I met Dad, I had to give him the real truth. That no,
sometimes that's the only thing that makes you leave him alone.
I hate to break your heart, buddy, but I met the man I'm going to marry.
So tell the story about when you met Dad.
Oh Lord, I told that to Mary.
I love that story.
Yeah, so anyway, that's what was going on. I was working at Commercial Credit, but we had this Ferndale minstrel variety show. Back then it was a minstrel show, and they had dancing girls and singers, and it was a great thing. It was a money-making thing, a project for the PTA that they, supported the school through that. And they, so I had been, even in high school, we were in these, like, sort of, I think they were doing school musicals then, you know, and I never really could sing at all, but I did love to dance. So if there was anything, a little dancing, they'd teach us these dances, and we could be in the, I think there was one school play that I might have been in. Well, then when the minstrel thing came along, then all my friends and I said, let's go to the minstrel. Let's be dancers in the minstrel. They have a good.
So you didn't really have a lot of dance experience.
Some people did, but I
didn't.
No. And some people went in as in the chorus.
Oh,
You know, there was a chorus that sang, and we wanted to dance. So we did that one year, and then the next year. We says, well, let's do that again. It's so much fun. We have all ages, and they made these lavish costumes, and it was really quite a nice production, you know. And so we did it the next year then, and it was January, a very cold, wintry, sunny day, though. You know, it was sunny, and the sun was really glary. And we go to rehearsal in January, and we think, well, we're just going to get started with what the show's going to be that year, what's going to the whole program and everything. And we see this guy come in his navy top coat, you know, hair slicked back. No, it wasn't a DA; it was just short and pushed back, and you know, and who is that? Who is that? Everyone's saying, and back then. I was, like I said, very social. We went to all the dances. We went to I never bar hopped, but there was a canteen there, and never did the bar thing because I wasn't old enough, and I didn't really like to lie about that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's the kind of person I was. So anyway, I didn't know that part of party or going out, but we did the canteen. We did local dances and knew a lot of people through the cheerleaders and basketball players and stuff. So I thought, well, who is this guy, and why don't I know him?
Oh, right. Never seen him around.
Never seen him around town. And so he comes up, and he's in front of the band there because they had a live band. And it was, and he's talking to the guys in the band, and the girls are saying, who is that? We're all talking among ourselves. And, that's Louis Justo's cousin. He's a professional singer. And I guess the coat, the hair, the glasses, black glasses. He had dark glasses because he had contacts. He couldn't stand the bright lights. And I thought, professional, I said. I was not impressed. and he heard me say that, and he was not impressed.
He wasn't impressed that you weren't impressed?
He didn't like hearing professional, But there were unknown things at that time. I had known that he was a professional singer, and he had been in Atlantic City singing and all that. So so finally we get organized, and we're going over some of the things that we were going to be doing, just a run through, and Dad gets up to sing. Well, I really had to eat my words, so I didn't say anything, and somehow we all get together after the practice, we went outside and we thought, we'll get snowballs. And we were about 5 of us were throwing snowballs all over him. His coat was all soaked with snowballs. So somehow he said, well, I'll take you home, you know.
To you.
That's what it was, you know. So, I don't know if he said to me or what, but we ended up. I says, okay, but we all need a ride, something like that. So he ended up taking everybody home, and he took me home last. But he had his dad's car that day, you know, and just drove me home, and we talked a little bit, you know. Well, he's from Winburn, and he just pretty much drove me home, and wasn't far, you know, just. And so that was probably the middle of January, and the next week then, I thought, well, you know, we just said goodbye, and that was it. And the next week, he comes in for rehearsal, and he's driving this other girl in, you know, and she was a singer in the group. And by then, Dad had we had our whole routines, what he was going to be singing, and he says, and we see him. I see him walking in with this girl, and thinking, "What are you with her for?" You know, and you know, she's divorced or something like that. And back then, not too many people were divorced. But I thought, well, maybe that is a girlfriend or something. I didn't know if he knew her, but he really didn't. It was just an acquaintance. And she needed a ride in, I think, and he picked her up to bring her in. That could have been 2 weeks later or something. So then it turned out, I think, trying to think, he must have brought me home a couple more times, and then I think he came in and met my parents. And even then I'm thinking, you know, I don't know, he's so far away, and he's Italian. Even back then, I'm thinking, you know, do they let you date, you know, are Italians allowed to date Slovaks? And yet it was not anything, even in growing up, that we talked about a lot, you know. It wasn't a thing that anyone said they couldn't, but anyway, Catholics, mostly if you were Catholic, and even some of that. So anyway, he met my parents. And
he hadn't asked you out on a date yet? Or
no, not at that time yet, I think. And then he did. And of course I think we went to a movie or something. We went to a movie, and then he kissed me. Good night, and that was it.
You're together.
Yeah. So anyway, that was January. Come February the 12th, he was at a rehearsal. And I remember it so well because it was his mother's birthday. And he says, I want you to come up to Winburn, and I want you to meet my parents. So
after a month of dating?
Yeah, basically about a month. Yeah, it was probably about a month, just driving me home. And so we go up, and it's bad weather in February and that. So we go in, and I don't remember. I think it was, for some reason, maybe it wasn't even after a rehearsal. For some reason, I remember being dressed up, you know. And at rehearsal, we were wearing Bermuda shorts with knee-high socks, or Bobby socks. You know, that was the style back then. So he takes me to his parents' house, and we park the car and go upstairs because they were in the house, but they were in the second floor apartment.
Now, were they in that red house?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They were up there, and they were the kitchen there. There was Frank's mom and dad and his grandparents. And a friend, Anna Losky's a friend of Grandma and Grandpa's, that they played, you know, they did things, fished together and stuff like that. And so I just remember peeking, like sort of going into the kitchen and looking in, you know, and seeing them all there at once. And,
it was intimidating.
And just thinking, yeah, I wonder what they think and stuff like that. And so then we leave. Okay, then we go, and Dad takes me home again, and he says the next morning his mom and dad woke him up, or got out of bed. He says, now that's the kind of girl you should bring home. So I guess I made a hit.
What was it you liked about Dad when you first met him? What attracted you to him?
He was so, I guess his voice, his whole persona, he was dressed nice. You know, he had a nice style to him, and his singing. He was just a real gentleman. He just always was, you know, just a real gentleman, and I liked that about him. And his looks, you know, because he definitely was good looking. And but at that time, when I met Dad, my girlfriend Creedine and I were planning, because we hadn't met anybody. We were only 20 years old. I was 20, and I think I turned 21 then that's fall. But we were thinking, she hadn't met anyone, and she didn't date much or anything, and so she was sort of wanting to go to Washington, D.C. And back then, she had an aunt down there, and she said, they're talking about daycare centers. We could run a daycare center. This was our plan. We were going to she said, I think my aunt and uncle could help out, find us a place. Why we did that, I mean, why would that come into our plan? I don't know, you know, but that's what she said. There's going to be a big demand for daycare centers starting, and we only knew of babysitting then. They didn't have daycare centers. Yeah,
I didn't know they had them that back
then. But
in
D.C., they were just something,
like the bigger cities.
Something new, like you know. And she says, so why don't we think about going down there? We'll get a job, and then we'll work on getting this daycare center. We'll hire a nurse, a teacher, and we'll just, you know, we'll work with the kids and all that. So she worked at an office downtown, and that's what we were going to do. So, but then when I met Dad, my thoughts were all different.
Was she mad?
Yeah, she was.
I bet.
Why are you doing this? This is so unlike you. You've never let a guy do, you know, you've never left that interfere with our plans. And she was very disappointed. And as it turned out, she met somebody.
Local?
No, he came in from, he was Italian too, from Salzburg. He came in with the mill in a college. He was a college graduate. And of course Dad had college too, so that also appealed to me too, that he was, you know, he had gone to college for music. So her husband had been in a business degree or something, and he was brought in to work in the office at the mill. And a mutual friend of all of ours she worked in there too, so she introduced Creedine to Gino, his name is, and honestly, it's just like they clicked so fast, and she'd never really dated a lot, and had a serious boyfriend, and they just got so serious so fast that she was happy after that.
So she never went to D.C.
No, neither of us ever did. It ended up that she got married before I did.
Oh, wow.
She got married I got married in September. She got married in November.
So you met in January and you got married in September?
No, the next year.